Welcome back to Staying Relevant, the podcast where we explore what it means to evolve, adapt, and lead in the ever-changing worlds of health, performance, and personal development. Today, I'm honored to sit down with someone whose work has influenced me for years, Brett Jones. If you've been around the world of kettlebells, functional training, or rehabilitation, you've no doubt come across Brett's work. As a master instructor with Strong First, licensed athletic trainer, and co-creator of foundational programs like Secrets of Series, Applied Strength, and his most recent publication, Iron Cardio, to name a few. Brett has spent over 2 decades simplifying complex training concepts and bridging the gap between strength and rehab. But Brett's journey isn't just about performance, it's about resilience. In recent years, he's overcome stage 3 throat cancer, rebuilt himself from the ground up, and developed a new system called Iron Cardio, a testament to what happens when science, experience, and intuition meet. In this episode, we dive deep, not just into training philosophies, but into the human experience behind them. We explore how Brett's health journey reshaped his approach to movement, how he stayed relevant in the ever-evolving field, and the principles he lives by today as a coach, educator, and person.
Up to this point, I've been every kind of trainer you can be, right? I was the functional training guy. I was the body weight guy. I was the, whatever. I just kind of sampled the fitness buffet. Now, to the point of things not being sexy enough or, things like that, what I always tell folks is results are sexy. February 2020, diagnosed with stage 3 primary tonsillar squamous cell carcinoma. Went through 7 weeks of radiation, 5 days a week.
Whether you're a clinician, coach, or someone just trying to move better and live stronger, this conversation is packed with hard-earned wisdom and practical insight. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brett Jones. Thanks for joining us, Brett.
Wow. I thank you for that wonderful intro, and it's an honor to be here and I have a chance to talk to you and your audience. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, as I mentioned before in our previous, I am very excited about this conversation, and I will admit to everybody that I fanboyed out a little bit, just to kind of creep you out. But your work has influenced me from the very beginning of my career as a PT, AT, and strength coach. But I want to start grassroots. Where did you get started in the strength and conditioning, athletic training? What point did kettlebells come into your radar and you realize their potential for movement, restoration, and performance?
So it's kind of funny. Came out of athletic training, took my first job, got my master's and then took my first job and ended up working in Chatham, Virginia, where Gray Cook lives. And so I worked with Gray in his clinics and in my training room from 95 to 97. And then I left there and went up to Clarion, PA, and ran a hospital fitness center for 5 years, 97 to 2002. And during that time, somebody that I'd worked with had said, "Hey, you got to check out this guy named Pavel." And they recommended Power to the People, one of Pavel's early books. And so I got that and I was like, wow, it was the anti-bodybuilding message. It was frequent training. It was, based on strength, not, aesthetics and, all these things. And I was in, I was deadlifting and side pressing and, trying to do things. And, up to this point, I've been every kind of trainer you can be, right? I was the functional training guy. I was the body weight guy. I was the, whatever. I just kind of sampled the fitness buffet as I was coming up in the early years and transitions into running this hospital fitness center. And after having bought Pavel's first book, the marketing machine kicks in and I start hearing about kettlebells. So I buy the original Russian Kettlebell Challenge book and I read it and I said, I can do all this with a dumbbell. I threw it in a drawer behind me. And I'm like, but it's scratching at the back of my head. Yeah. And so I pull it back out and I'm like, I should. All right. So I hooked up a dumbbell and I was going to do dumbbell snatches, try one of the protocols and back. And after EMS revived me, I decided that I should probably, that's a joke, folks. For those of you that don't know my dry sense of humor, that's a joke. But it was an intense session and it was enough to convince me to say, I should probably go get trained in this. Right. I'm interested in this. So I got my first kettlebell in late 2001 and then went and got certified in February of 2002. and really different experience from the current certifications.
Yeah.
But, and then I was invited to be a senior instructor, what we called senior instructor at the time, in April of 2003. So a few years down the road from having gotten my first kettlebell and getting certified and starting to teach, at these certifications, which has been, you never know when you make that decision that all of a sudden becomes your life's work, like teaching kettlebell training and coaching instructors. I never thought that would be my literally my career and kind of life's work sort of thing, but that's what it's turned into.
Yeah. It's I'm an AT from the States, and then came back, did my master's for PT here. And I was doing my advanced diploma for manipulative therapy. And, it takes a few years to do. I'm at my buddy's house in London, and he opened up his clinic, and he's got all these videos. And I'm like, what are the secrets of series? I was like, can I borrow these? He's like, yeah. You like, just take them, watch them. And I would watch those. I would set my laptop. It was a 2.5 hour drive when I was going to and from, but I would put my laptop and I would listen, and I would kind of like, we're on the highway driving, which I know not supposed to do. And I'm like, oh my God, this stuff is amazing. So I got the entire, I took his entire series. I watched those things probably like, and so I'm coming around to this because that's where I saw you using kettlebells. And the way you were using them, not just from a movement restoration, but even from a rehabilitation perspective, I said, oh man, we're missing so much. And coming from a strength and conditioning background and an AT background, and then PT, they don't teach us lifts. They're giving band exercises, little dumbbells. And I'm like, this is not loading the body. This makes no sense. But they're so afraid to load. And, it is what it is. But it's our responsibility to look outside the box and expand our knowledge. But, watching you and Gray utilize the kettlebells in the Secrets of series, it became, when I opened my own clinic, it actually became, everyone has to watch these DVDs type of thing. Like this is the foundation in which we are all learning how to start looking at the body, and then using the algorithms of movement, and then, developing other things on the side, doing it myself and feeling how it helped my body, even just performance, chronic hamstring strains growing up as a soccer player, high hamstring strains, because all you did was maybe you squatted, and I don't even think I deadlifted in university. It was leg press, squats, maybe some lunges and some leg curls, right? But not having those ballistics and training the hamstrings of what they're actually supposed to do. I was like, holy crap, like no wonder. And I've never had a hamstring strain since. But, watching my exposure to kettlebells and seeing their potential from a performance perspective in rehab, it came from those videos that you did with Gray. And I want to thank you for that. And it's awesome that you're continuing to do, what you're doing and evolving that. So, this original philosophy, when you first entered into the profession, how has that shifted over time? Because, perspectives evolve. You sampled all the different modalities out there, and we all do it. Started with bodybuilding, went to functional training, whatever that means, and but then everything's kind of you take all these tools. How has your philosophy shifted or changed, or what have you kind of pulled in from everything that you've learned?
Yeah, it's it is kind of weird to sit back and think of I think when you're the person evolving, it's sometimes hard to take in the evolution.
Yeah.
Other people will see what you're doing and say, well, yeah, that's not how you used to say that. And I'm like, really? Feels like I've always said it this way. But I think, coming, if I put my training philosophy into a very simple bullet list, movement quality matters.
Yeah.
Movement quality is king. Your ability to get in position and feel good, right? I think that's, we've both been through some struggles, and we've both been in positions of not feeling good.
Yeah.
And I can scientifically tell you feeling good feels good. And the way you get there is really your movement quality. I see people, the forums and different things, they get into simple and sinister. They get into whatever routine, and all of a sudden they're tweaking things and things are going wrong. It's like, well, it's a movement issue or it's a technique issue. The only way I know it's just a technique issue is I take the movement issue off the table.
Yeah.
I know how you move. So movement quality is king. Strength is the primary quality. We need to build strength. We need to build, and then following that, we need to turn that into power.
Yeah.
And then, wrap it all together into energy system work, kind of ties everything together. And so that sort of little 4-point list is really where my training philosophy is kind of narrowed down to. Mm-hmm. And I think that the early days of thinking that you needed to train everything, and there were all of these boxes to check, and then you start realizing, oh, if I check this box, these 5 also get checked.
Yeah,
I'm just going to check that one box.
Yeah.
And so that's been, I think, what's happened over the years is just kind of, I think it's there's a quote that I'm trying to think of. It's in the amateur's mind, there are many options. In the professional's mind, there are few.
Yeah.
And that kind of, as you go through, you do kind of narrow in on your philosophy. It doesn't mean that I'm not constantly taking new information in. But if information is going to make it through the filter, it's going to be good information and something that moves the needle.
Yeah. And, what you just said there with regards to, in order to bring in new information and not create a lot of confusion or distraction away from, what your core principles are, having that filter is so important. But that's those key, working from first principles. And and I've done the same thing, the longer I've been doing this, the less complicated you try and make it, and the less things, and having an understanding of these other modalities and the other things. But what is it performing? What are the outcomes? Because that's all that matters at the end is the result. What outputs is this, what is this achieving? And if you can do one thing that achieves 5, I'd rather do the one, but that's not sexy for a lot of people.
100%.
Right. So the brain likes, novelty, and, the brain likes, variability. How do you work around that? When you're working with clients, you're telling them, hey, I just want you to get really good with a clean, a press, a squat, a snatch, and, pull-ups or whatever it is, and get really good with these. And you're going to do these 3 times a week. We know that you can get people really fit by doing push-ups, pull-ups, and hill sprints, but it's hard to package and sell that.
And I think that, the craving towards novelty, it's interesting though, because the, two directions there for the fitness professional. If you're actually knocking off 30, 40 sessions a week, you've got kind of that booked calendar where you're knocking off a bunch of sessions a week. Mm-hmm. And Alan Cosgrove has talked about this. Your clients, your students are not bored. You are. Because if we're honest, those 30 or 40 hours of training out of a week, the sessions look pretty similar.
Right.
You're doing a warm up, You're hitting some strength work, you're doing some conditioning. By the end of 40 hours of that in a week, you're like, oh, time to make the donuts, right? But your student who is newer to this, they're still learning. They're still enjoying the process and the training. So don't confuse your boredom with the boredom of the student. They might not be bored. Now, to the point of things not being sexy enough or things like that, what I always tell folks is results are sexy. Guess how a musician gets to Carnegie Hall?
Yeah.
They practice.
Yeah.
Right? They're running the same chords for the 30, 40, 50, 70-year career. I'm thinking of a quote from a famous cellist whose name I can never remember, who was asked why he was still practicing at the age of 92. And he said, because I think I'm starting to make progress.
Yeah, you have that in your book.
Yeah. So if we kind of bring that mentality to what we're doing and we embrace the skill aspect of what we're doing. Dr. Ed Thomas, one of my mentors, said, I never went to the gym to work out. I went to the gym to learn. Mm-hmm. Now, in the process of learning, did I get sweaty? Did I get tired? Did I get, quote, fit? Yes. But that wasn't the goal.
Yeah.
The goal was to learn the next progression. I'm 22, 24 years into swinging kettlebells. I'm still working on my swing. I filmed a set of snatches the other day that made me throw up in my mouth a little bit. I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I've been doing kettlebell snatches for a long time. And I'm pretty good at them. But I looked at this set and I was like, oh, I've got work to do.
Yeah.
And so changing the conversation from the workout to the practice, to the learning, to the results, that's where I kind of go with the sexy versus effective sort of delineation. But that's also where the movement prep and the kind of movement practice that I do, that's where we get a little bit of a lot of that movement variability that we need.
Yeah.
We need movement variability,
yeah.
right? I also do Indian clubs. Mm-hmm. And so there's a skill aspect there, and they're nice. And I do the 1 and 2 pound Indian clubs. I don't do the heavy meals and maces.
Okay.
I do enough heavy.
Right.
When I started looking at the different implements, I didn't need another version of heavy training.
Yeah.
I'm already pretty good at that. I needed light, restorative, Indian clubs. Yeah. And so in that mix of ground-based movement exploration and Indian clubs and really trying to refine my practice on the essential kettlebell skills, you actually get a lot of variability.
Yeah. That's another tool that you inadvertently introduced to me with is the Indian clubs. And again, you start doing that. You start working on those PNF patterns. It's very high cerebellar activation. You start adding in rhythm, looking at it. We look at things from a neurological perspective, from like cerebellar activation, rate, rhythm, force, and accuracy, and then how that all ties together with the physical body. And when I started doing clubs, it's juggling, but it's juggling with like resistance, right? But you're not letting them go, but you have to time things in at the right time, or else you're like, well, that didn't feel smooth. It's like the kettlebell swing. When you fail to swing, it's just, it got so heavy and hard. That feedback loop is immediate. And hopefully you don't keep, hopefully you're a quick learner where you pay attention to it and you don't keep swinging it poorly and then jack something up. But what are some of the metrics that you use? So you talk about results, or, what are the outcomes that we're looking for training? Do you have any standard metrics that you use to show people like, look, yeah, we're doing these 4 or 5 movements. You might be getting a little bit bored, but look at what we've changed. Are there any standards that you have that you set, or is that dependent on the individual, or both? Really
dependent on the individual.
Okay.
I'm two things are flashing through my mind. I had a client some years ago who I worked with him post rehab on 2 different. He had 2 hip replacements, and so I was doing post rehab stuff after the first one, getting him ready for the second one, and then he had the second one, and we did post rehab and all of this kind of stuff. And so we done a good job. He was moving pretty well and feeling pretty good. And I'm kind of like, anything else you want to work on? And he goes, well, yeah, I guess so. Could probably stand to lose a few pounds.
Okay.
I said, okay, well, we'll need to take a look at your diet. He goes, okay, no thanks. I mean, it was that quick. He didn't have to think about it too hard. It was like, well, we're going to have to look at your diet. Nah, I'm good. Apparently I don't need to lose weight. Okay. And I was like, okay, so let's keep doing what we're doing and work towards the next progression.
Okay.
A lot for me is skill progression and things like that.
Yeah.
From an iron cardio additional thing there.
Yeah.
I do work with a lot of people who are kettlebell instructors.
Yep.
And so they may be preparing for a recert or their next certification. And so the goals make themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They got to get ready for a snatch test. They got to be ready to test X.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the goals just are part and parcel of what you're working towards. But even then I try to keep it towards the skill end of things.
Yeah.
And then if I'm working with somebody that just has more general fitness goals and I'm getting them on that iron cardio sort of program, I look at, what's our load / intensity. And that might confuse some of the listeners perhaps, because I think in the general fitness world, we tend to think of intensity as, a facial expression and it's all you, bro, kind of moment where you're pushing through a set. Intensity is a scientific formula. It's a % of your 1 RM or your % of your repetition max that you're working within. And so the intensity or load versus how many sets you're accomplishing of what variation in how much time. So density, variation, intensity kind of factors in. And I can quickly look at somebody going through the iron cardio protocols and say, we started this with a 12.
Yeah.
You just did 40 sets or 30 sets with a 20 kilo.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're from. That means progress.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is they feel better.
Yep.
We manage, some days, as you know, with clients, it's whack-a-mole, right? I had to put the storm shutters on the house, right? People live down in Florida and have to get ready for a hurricane.
Yeah.
Had to put the storm shutters on the house, and I tweaked X.
Right.
Okay, well, let's take a look.
Yep.
Let's see what we can do. And so I'm very, very free flowing I'm not rigid with a lot of goals and standards because I'm just not.
Well, we're dynamic beings that are constantly under stress, and things are changing in our internal environment, external environment. You don't know what the mindset is, So, I mean, coming in with a plan, like you talked about in your book, is you're like, well, I have this written down on paper, but how do I feel that day? And if it doesn't feel like it's fitting, okay, great. Well, that's a form of feedback as to, I'm not going to force this square peg into this round hole right now, because I'm not going to get the intensity. I'm not going to get the work output that I want. I might hurt myself because I'm not focused. So pivoting on that, from based on what you're getting from the system is key. And that's part of the intuition part of things. But how do you talk to some of the younger coaches or some of the younger practitioners of, are you not recovered? Are you not activated enough? How can they tell the difference between, I've overtrained or I'm overreaching, so maybe I need to reduce the intensity or the load here, or I might need to do some more recovery stuff, or maybe I haven't activated enough and that I just need to spend a little more time on warm up to get the system firing up. Where does that all come in? Is that just with time and wisdom and experience, or how do you train your coaches and your clients to know when to push the gas, when to back off, or when to spend a little bit more time in maybe a preparation phase?
So 30,000 foot view.
Yeah.
If you're always trying to figure out how to recover from your training, you're doing too much. It's that simple.
Okay.
Like it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Now, we could throw in the lifestyle conversation there of sleep, hydration, nutrition, and stress, the four horsemen of progress, or the four horsemen of frustration. They can be either. It depends on how you're accessing those things. So, I had a conversation with a student just the other day, and he's like, man, training feels really heavy and I'm really struggling. I'm like, how you sleeping? He's like, sleep's been really bad. We've blah, blah, blah. So it's like, oh, okay. So that's why things are feeling heavy. Yeah. I'd put money on that. And so I try to zoom out with people and get this kind of global view, and a little bit of Gray's clarification on the SAID principle. The specific adaptation to imposed demands is the organism's specific adaptation to the environment's imposed demands. So let's take sleeping, for example. Let's say somebody's having trouble sleeping, so they start taking melatonin.
Yeah.
All right, well, melatonin is an organism solution, right? We're trying to tweak the organism to get things to change.
Yeah.
They haven't had a new mattress in 15 years. You can take all the melatonin you want. It's not fixing the mattress. Yeah. The environment issue is more important than taking the melatonin right now. And that happens from a programming perspective as well. People want to push and they want to achieve X, Y, and Z, but they're sleeping 5 hours a night. Their nutrition isn't dialed in. Their hydration is low, and they're trying to work 2 jobs, or they're having relationship stress. Good luck with that super intense program you just selected.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of first step in that, and starting to get people to think lifestyle plus programming and organism versus environment.
Yeah.
And then we can take it into on that kind of daily thing. Looking at one of my last sessions that I did, and I changed it. 2 times before I actually did it. I wrote down X, and I got started into, and we're going to talk about the prep and the activation and stuff like that in a second. So I wrote it down because that's how I program myself. I look at a blank piece of paper and go, what do I want to do today? And so I had written out X, and then that became Y, and then it became Q because it was just a day where I'm like, okay, none of this is going to work. We'll just do something, go back to the classic iron cardio, clean press squat, and just get a session in. Now for me, when I go through, I do a quick 3 to 5 minutes of foam roll. And that's just a check-in with the body. If your foam rolling is taking you 15 to 20 minutes, you need to reevaluate your relationship with that particular thing. So real quick foam roll, check in, no hot spots.
Good.
I get into my first get up of the day, which includes an arm bar and a bent arm bar and a couple other things. Call it a get up plus. That starts letting me know, all right feels good. Left feels good. Okay. Then I ladder up my get up to the heaviest weight that I'm going to be using for that day.
Oh, okay.
So if it's a 36 kilo day, I'll do a 24, 32, 36.
Okay.
I've been doing a little bit of 0-15 and doing some two-handed swings with a 48. And so there are days where I'll ladder all the way up to the 48 and end up doing, a few get-ups. And so usually by the end of that, and there's my ground-based movement practice in between the foam roll and the first get-up of the day.
What does that
and
look
that's
like?
Where we can put a link in the show notes.
Okay,
we've got a video. You could get Mind the Gap, which is my video on strongandfit.com.
Okay.
That covers a lot of these concepts and talks about mobility gaps, stability gaps, and strength gaps.
Perfect.
How you fill that, because minimalist programming, the reason I call it Mind the Gap is in minimalist programming, it covers everything till it doesn't.
Right.
And then you have to mind the gaps.
Right.
And the gaps that can show up are movement, stability, and strength.
Yep.
And so the ground-based thing is in that, and I've got a quick video of it on the FMS channel that we can get a link to.
Yep, that'd be awesome.
And so it includes a lot of ankle, hip, and T-spine, which are key areas for 99% of the population.
Yep.
And for me, I end up with some cross crawls. So I'm on my back, leaving my head on the ground, pulling the elbow to the opposite knee.
Yep.
And those cross crawls, with my hips and some of my history, cross crawls feel good. I got a pretty good idea that I can get into the training day. And then by the time I'm done with my get-ups and everything, I have a pretty good idea of what kind of load I can take on for that day. And so that's what I get most people, that some combination of that gets people to where by the time they get into the first work set of the day, they've got a pretty good idea of whether they need to modify or not.
Yeah. Using the Turkish get up as kind of like your screening tool, that reminds me of when you did the CKFMS video series, which I have, of course.
Oh boy. That was a lot.
That was a big DVD set, and it's sitting right there on my shelf. And again, it's just, it's taking, 2 different tools, a feedback loop from the FMS, but then just taking the concepts from the FMS as use movement as a feedback. How does it feel? What's the quality feel like? And then, what's the amount of effort? Put an intensity to that. And I'll tell my clients, I put them through what's called a self-awareness movement scan using a couple cerebellar tests to make sure top down's fine, eyes, vestibular apparatus, and then looking at cervical spine, global flexion, extension, rotation, single leg balance. And then notice, does anything feel different? And if they're like, well, one side feels pulley, or does it feel pinchy, or is there pain? Okay, well, let's clean that up, right? Now it's just a 3-minute scan, but if they have this baseline or this fundamental, this foundation, I'm like, great, now we can just do general stuff. Like the 80-20 principle is basically and if we can't clean it up, great. Well, now we got to figure out what kind of orthopedic problem do we have, but at least they have some kind of self-scan tool. And the Turkish get up that's right there, right? You're looking at asymmetry, strength, control, position sense. That feels a little bit off in that shoulder position, when I'm in that, in that open half kneel. Why is that shoulder not packing or setting properly? Is there neural tension? Is it a thoracic rotation issue? Like, it's just a quick screen of saying, hey, you know what, maybe we should pay attention to this before we really blast into this. And
Definitely.
Your whole approach there, you're from the ground up. How were we designed? How do we learn to move as babies? From the ground. Well, let's just see, how are you moving down there first? Oh, feeling pretty good. All right, let's start working into some transition stuff, right? But before that, you did let's put a foam roller on stuff to see if there's any ouchy spots, because you can't stretch those. And if there are a lot of them, maybe the system's telling you, because the fascia's, got 10 times more proprioceptors than the muscles. If the fascia's not ready and we got all these little nasty hot spots, maybe those are signals saying we might need to do a recovery day, right? Like, that's your first entry point, first screen of, how's the body feel? Oh, it feels pretty good. I don't need to spend 15 minutes here. Great. Let's rock, let's roll, let's do some crawling, let's work there. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Now let's load up a pattern to see how the system's organizing and positioning itself underneath a load before we start going into ballistics.
Absolutely.
So I love that. That's how we structure our warm-ups. Very similar. Change the inputs, see how the body's feeling, see how the body's moving around these primitive positions, and then work your way up. And, for me, it makes sense from a neurological perspective, because we were organized and designed that way. So why not warm up in the same direction?
100%.
Yeah. No.
And I think, an aging population, and more people that would classify as in the masters and seniors categories of different events, they're more interested in being fit than ever.
Yeah.
Well, an aging's population, number one fear, falling. Their number two fear, not being able to get back up.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of senior population, and, you talk to them and they're like, I go into somebody's house and I look at their sofa, and if I see one of those low sofas that I know I'm going to sink into, I don't want to sit down, because I'm going to need help getting back up.
Right.
And they don't want to do that. So they have this very practical goal of being able to get up and down out of a squishy sofa by themselves.
Yep.
And they want to be the fun grandparent that can get down on the ground and play with the kids and get back up. And so those are the moments when somebody comes back to me and says, able to get down on the ground and play with the grandkids, I felt great, and, just had a great time. Like that, those are the things that motivate me at this point in my career. Like, you have a goal of a military press PR. Awesome. I think it's a great goal. We should certainly pursue that. I'm more motivated by the overall life improvements that we can get into.
Yeah. When all my friends started hitting their 30s, they're all in the bodybuilder type phase, and they would come in to see me, and I was already into the kettlebells and the functional training, the mobility stuff. And they're like, I just don't want to hurt anymore. I was like, yeah, welcome to 30, man. Like, I want to be able to bend over and put my socks on. I was like, well, I'm glad you're here now and not another 10 years later. But, your priorities change as we get older, obviously. I tell the younger ones, I'm like, yeah, you can load up heavy consistently because your body can handle it. I said, I can still lift heavy, but once or twice a week where I'm playing with a barbell. I like my kettlebells. I do my gymnastic stuff. That's the stuff that makes me feel the best, and I move the best. But, that's part of that intuition over time of knowing what works best for you. But, some of the key principles in iron cardio, can you distill it down into kind of traditional, like, how does it differ from the traditional strength and endurance protocols? Because I after reading your book, I did a couple of the workouts. I had a kettlebell. I'm like, okay, let's do this. I'm like, clean, press, squat, snatch. And then my first workout, I tried to do 1-arm push-up. I want to take a quick break from today's episode to share something I believe every rehab and performance professional should know about. For years, I saw too many clients go through the same cycle: short-term fixes, temporary relief, and then the same issues coming back again. That's why I built the Advanced Movement Therapist certification. It's not just another course. It's a system that helps you identify the real cause of a client's pain, give them results that actually last, and stand out in a crowded industry. You'll get practical tools and strategies that you can take straight into your sessions so you can help people get better faster. If you're ready to become the go-to clinician in your community, head to amtcertified.ca to learn more. That's amtcertified.ca. Your clients will thank you. And after about 3 rounds, I'm like, you know what? We'll just stick to the one arm press for now. And then I just threw in like a split stance row, right? To kind of get a pull. I was on the dock and it's a floaty dock. So I had the extra variability of the dock floating around. But, doing that, the hardest part for me was the rest, like to not blast yourself. The discipline of taking the time between the repetitions to make sure every single rep, that's hard to do. So I know that's one of the key principles in iron cardio, and as well as with a lot of your other strength protocols. Can you briefly lay out for the listeners kind of how it differs from your traditional, because it's an oxymoron. What you've done is you build strength in cardio, and people are like, well, cardio is running and repetition and burning stuff. And then you realize, it's not. And yeah. So can you just for the listeners, I've read the book, distill that down, how it differs from other things. That'd be great.
Yeah. And the name of the, iron cardio is admittedly a little clickbaity.
Yeah.
And there's an exercise physiologist somewhere in the world right now whose head's about to explode because they're so frustrated that we keep saying we're going to strength train for cardio.
Yes.
And so we'll get into that here in just a second. I think Pavel gave a great example or perspective on this. It's more of a manual labor perspective. If I've worked manual labor jobs in my life, and when you get to the work site at 7 a.m. and you're going to be there till 5 or 7 at the end of the day, you're not going to come out of the gate too fast.
No.
Right? You're going to pace yourself so that you can sustain the workload over the hours that you're going to be doing it. And you're going to take breaks. And so, that feeling, that's kind of the feeling that I'm shooting for as I go through a session is I want this kind of manual labor feel to it where I know I could keep going, and I want the quality of every rep to be as high as it can be. I want my clean to be precise and load me up for my press. I want my press to be precise. I want my squat to feel good. I want that snatch to be powerful, whatever combination that I'm doing. So, and it really is a accumulation of a lot of singles, right? So clean press squat, 3 reps, 1 of each, right? If I do traveling twos where I do, 2 cleans, 1 press, 1 squat, 1 clean, 2 press, 1 squat, 1 clean, 1 press, 2 squats. Now I'm up to 4 reps per set. Sliding singles gets me up to 5 reps per set. So if I do 40 sets at the 3 rep version, 40 sets, I've done 120 reps. At 4 reps, 160. At the 5 rep, I've done 200 reps. It's a lot of volume.
Yeah. Yeah, right? When you do the math.
It accumulates.
Yeah.
When you do the math, and that's something I'm really bad at because I was down in Costa Rica with my friend Victor Carrilla getting to teach, and I was telling him about one of the sessions I had done. And he goes, wait a second. He gets his phone and he doesn't, do you know what you just did? I'm like, no. It was like a 240 rep workout with 120 presses in it. And he's like, that's most people's monthly NL for their load. Like you just did it in a session in like 40 minutes. I'm like, okay. Just really bad at doing the math. So the idea is we want to accumulate this work with quality and precision and high output, but not be continuous. And the reason I've narrowed down on 3 to 5 reps is your range.
Yeah.
I've done 6 rep sets, 7 rep, 8 rep sets. They don't work. It just turns out to be too much. You're not, I'm going to say you're not heavy enough to get the strength out of it. And you're not, the cardio overwhelms, the stress overwhelms everything else that you're doing, and your quality goes down and just doesn't work. So when we look at muscle function in particular, and we look at, creating tension within a muscle, we restrict blood flow, which means we have a lot of glycolysis that kicks in very early into the muscle contraction. And we want to return to good blood flow and good metabolic function in between what we're doing. And so the heart rate response, and for the exercise physiologists out there, I understand, and we understand that when you go under load and you have that restriction of blood flow and pressure that the body now has to pump through, we have a pressure load and a volume load. We already talked about the pressure. Now the heart has to push blood out through the system that's already pressurized. So that's hard to do. Yep. It takes more effort for the heart to do that. But because of the pressure, there's not as much blood coming back. So now you have a volume load problem where the left ventricle is not getting the good, healthy stretch that it usually gets before it has that strong contraction. The benefit of traditional cardio and more rhythmical cardio options is you get that big return left ventricle stretch. Yeah. You're not under as much pressure. You have this rhythmical contraction thing happening that actually helps move all the blood and everything. So there's your contrasting strength for cardio versus cardio for cardio. And so in keeping the reps low and sets short and resting in between, we avoid most of those problems of using strength training for cardiovascular adaptation. And traditional cardiovascular adaptation is going to be pretty much focused on VO2 max.
Yeah.
There are a lot of peripheral adaptations to cardiovascular work that are actually more important from a performance standpoint than VO2 max.
Right.
Sports like cross-country skiing, marathons, take your pick of your kind of the activities where it really benefits you to be a pair of legs with the lungs.
Yeah.
Tour de France, right? VO2 max is super important there.
Yeah.
In almost every other sport, not that important.
Yeah.
But these peripheral adaptations, your ability to have this efficiency and energy production and waste removal and different things that you get into are actually really important. And so a little bit of stress, a little bit of recovery, a little bit of stress, a little bit of recovery. And so I don't know that I've done a good job of answering your question because I went about 10 different directions, but so
I'm curious as to, so for the exercise physiologists who, would push up against, well, you need to increase lactic acid thresholds, and that's another stimulus in itself. And, from a longevity, and everyone's talking about VO2 max as, the number one, marker for longevity and performance and all this. Where, will you blend, or again, do we see some of the benefits from the iron cardio type of workout to, like you said, it's working more the peripheral vascular system as opposed to your VO2 max, where it's that long continuous, but from my experience, when I trained kettlebells, when I was training for my RKC, we had to do the snatch. It was Enter the Kettlebell, I think was the book that you used to train for that. And one of the protocols, because you got to do the snatch test, right? You got to prove that you can do the stuff, which I agree with every single certification. Like, if you can't demonstrate a level of proficiency, why are you getting certified? So one of the things that you had to do was roll a set of dice, right? Whatever you roll, that's what you swing. Do you know how many 12s I rolled? God damn it. And it was in February, -20 in my garage, because I had to go to California. I didn't have to go, but that's where I made sure I did it. End of March, but I rolled so many 12s, and, making sure you're breathing and your fatigue levels are managed. But, when you get into fatigue, you got to make sure you're more efficient at the movement, which is one of the things that I learned. But where I'm going with this is, that was a different kind of training, and you are breathing heavy. I got better at running, and I wasn't running. And I'm a goalkeeper for soccer. I don't run. I yell and I come out and I sprint and I jump and I hit the occasional guy coming out to do it, right? And when we got into spring training for the provincial team, normally, like, after 2 laps around the field, my back's cramping up. Everything's like I got a stitch. I could run forever. And all I did was I swung a kettlebell, and I got really good with the kettlebells. Is there, similar to that, and that's higher intensity, that's getting a lactic acid burn. Do you see some of the benefits with the iron cardio carrying over by developing that strength, by developing that ability and efficiency to create stress, recover, create stress? you see a lot of that carry over in other performance activities such as running or sprinting or throwing or striking?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely rewinding to the lactic threshold sort of conversation.
Yes.
Traditionally, that has been looked at as we need to increase your tolerance to the burn.
Yes.
Right? We're just going to make you good at being miserable. Okay. There's another way to do it. We can build your capacity. We can actually get your system more efficient at clearing the waste products. And we're mainly talking about the hydrogen ions here.
Yeah.
And lactate is a fuel.
Yeah, it's a fuel.
There's all the conversations around lactic acid. And it's not lactic acid that's the problem. It's hydrogen ions and some different things that are happening. And so traditionally, it's been, we're just going to get you good at dealing with the burn. But the anti-glycolytic protocols and things that we've been using within Strong First for the last several years, we're actually focused on building your capacity to handle that and clear it and have a more efficient system. And so, yeah, our training doesn't need to look like our testing.
Right.
And in the end, a little 4 to 6 week glycolytic peak is really effective.
Yep.
We understand that. And so if I'm getting somebody ready for a snatch test, everything that leads up to the last 4 to 6 weeks is not going to be very glycolytic. But then in that last 4 to 6 weeks, because glycolytic peaking, super effective, but it happens within a short window. It only sticks around for a short window. That's why it's called a peak.
Right.
And then if you try to stay on the peak, you do fall off the other side.
Right.
And so from that standpoint, what we're trying to build is capacity, not tolerance.
Gotcha.
So I need a little bit of stimulus, a little bit of acid.
Yep.
I need to give myself time to clear it. So that's kind of the mindset behind a lot of the protocols. And so, but then from the cardiovascular standpoint, or the those peripheral adaptations, mitochondrial efficiency and muscle fiber work and different things that are happening, those are profound within a performance standpoint, more and kind of in a global sort of fashion. And so the heart rate response that we get, I'm more concerned with what my heart is doing between the sets than in the sets.
Okay.
Which is another reason that resting is so important, because that's when I'm actually getting some of that cardiovascular benefit in between. And you should back this up with a little bit of zone 2 work or a little bit of swings.
Yep.
I would, again, recommend more of an anti-glycolytic sort of protocol. 5-6 reps, 4 to 6 reps top of the minute, 3 to 5 reps every 30 seconds, depends on where you are in your progression. Okay. Easy ways to just kind of get a ton of work in and get a lot of benefit from it.
Are there any other components? You know, it seems like everyone's talking about fascia, which has been around for decades, and it's now like this is the new train. It's like the new functional training. It's the new kettlebell, and it's like it's important. I mean, when I got out of the hospital, one of the things we lose as we get older is that elasticity, that efficiency to bounce. And then applying more isometrics and hopping into every single, part of my workout. Are there other components in your system? Like when would you apply, say, hopping, isometric work? I looked at your program, it looked like it was kind of like an every other day type of thing. Are you doing any other modalities in the days in between? Or is it based on how you're feeling, or is it pretty, because you're getting so much carryover from the kettlebell work to overall athleticism, again, simplifying things and, do the one thing that does 5. Are there any other pieces that you'll plunk in there, and when would you do those?
So, I'm actually I'm working on an Iron Cardio Volume 2 as we speak, and some of those protocols are going to take care of some of the things that we're talking about right now. But from a general standpoint, so I don't do much other than my kettlebell training. So for me, for you still being athletic, being a goalkeeper, wanting to maintain that performance, yes, I would have, and probably a little bit kind of in between the get-ups and the iron cardio work, I would have some of that bounding and loading, because I want you to doing that fresh. I want you doing that, when the system is primed for it. occasionally in a fatigue state, because that's going to happen in a game,
Yep.
right? And we don't want to always avoid that, but that's going to happen during practice anyway.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's interesting here is that strength conditioning, you have to take into account what the athlete's doing on the court. Volleyball players, they jump a lot, right? They're at the net, they're jumping. And I'm thinking of old study. It was comparing female volleyball players with female basketball players. And female volleyball players had better vertical leaps and were doing better from a jumping perspective. Female basketball players at the time, not many people dunking. You only need to jump high enough to get a rebound.
Yeah.
So you're not really working your vertical leap the same way. So because the net is achievable and spiking and things like that, they were spending more time jumping, therefore they were better at jumping. But if we pull back and look at traditionally things we would do to help people with their vertical leap with some plyometrics and things like that, the volleyball players are jumping a lot in practice.
Yeah.
You don't need to add plyometric load to your strength conditioning work.
Right.
They're already doing it.
Yes.
Basketball players, because they're not jumping as much in this study, just specific to this study, we could probably add a little plyometric work into that and get some benefit there. And so if I don't do it as a brief section before the main work, then I would do it on the following day.
Gotcha.
It'd be kind of its own independent day. And maybe you are at practice and getting ready for practice and doing some bounding and things like that to get ready for being on the field.
Gotcha.
On the pitch.
Yeah. So I guess, it comes back to what are the goals of the individual and the goals of the athlete and what are their physical demands. So, okay. Yeah. So it doesn't change much. Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit on your health crisis, right? How did that change, having that stage 3 throat cancer, correct?
It was.
Yeah. How did that change your identity and training outlook compared to before?
Yeah. It's interesting because, February 2020, diagnosed with stage 3 primary tonsillar squamous cell carcinoma. Went through 7 weeks of radiation, 5 days a week, the 7 weeks, 2 chemo infusions, lost over 40 pounds. It was 205, probably a little bit more before treatment started. I was 164, 163, 164 at the end of treatment.
Yeah.
Had a rough go of it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw one thing in here before we keep talking about me, which I'm okay with, is the caretakers, right? Your wife and family, my wife, taking care of me during that time. And it's hard on them.
Yeah.
It's goes beyond just what I experienced and to what the caretaker had to do to help us and help me, my wife, helping me get through that experience. So back to the training conversation. I was pursuing Sinister before this happened. It was a lot of work with the 48 and doing making some decent progress towards that. And then when I came back, it was I figured out 40 pounds lighter. Let's do some body weight work, and wasn't strong enough to really move my body weight well.
Yeah.
So I said, let's go back to the program minimum, swings and get-ups.
Yeah.
Wasn't strong enough to be ballistic.
Nope.
And so ended up at rebuilding the strength with the iron cardio. Strength aerobics is where this originally started.
Right.
An article by Alexei Senart and Pavel from 2014, and I've been doing some versions of it, but blew it out into this entire different thing. And I think the biggest shift in training is to feel good. Like it sounds like either a wish I had a V8 moment or maybe wouldn't be pushing hard enough in my training or something like that. But that's really the biggest shift is instead of looking at training as a pushing towards some performance goal or weight goal or something like that, which I still do. I do a lot of training with 32, double 32s, 36 kilos, some 40 kilo, sprinkle in the 48 for some swings every now and then. I'm still training what I would consider heavy enough, but the goal of the training has shifted to where I want to feel good. In addition to, if we peel back, if we look at the history, I've had like 11 or 12 different surgeries. Only 3 of those were orthopedic.
Right.
I just kind of, I left inguinal hernia when I was a junior in college. I had a septoplasty, a left inguinal hernia, because I broke my nose a bunch of times wrestling and other roughhousing activities. Just over the years, I accumulated a lot of stuff. I've definitely had an L5S1 laminectomy in 2003. Had epidural injections in 2016-17. Had a melanoma removed, sentinel node biopsy in 2016. A lot of different things have happened, and I would always kind of come back into some sort of strength goal, and power lifted for a while, and did strongman and grip training to a pretty high level at one point. And after all of this has happened, and you really get that gut punch of the cancer diagnosis and the struggle through surviving treatment. My biggest shift is just like, I want to feel good.
Yeah.
I've felt bad. I don't want to feel that way anymore. That's really the biggest shift.
Yeah. It comes that time with wisdom and changing perspective of what's actually important. And you're still lifting heavy, and it's going to, improve longevity. You're still maintaining strength, but it's smart strength. It's not this, I got to go in and PR my deadlift today. I'm like, why? Why do you need to do that?
Right.
Like, okay, great. You did it once for Instagram, but now, you've got back pain. Can't touch it for a couple of weeks.
Right.
What was the point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that, you can train the power lifts, right, without maxing them.
Yeah.
But like probably 10 different listeners' heads just exploded when they heard that, because it's like, well, what do you mean I'm not setting a 1 RM? Well, train the lifts without having to max.
Yeah.
And the barbell, I think at a certain point, your wiggle room. One of the great things about the kettlebell, single kettlebell work in particular, is your ability to adapt and move around different uniquenesses.
Yeah.
Right. You can have a little bit of a structural difference between your shoulders, your hips, whatever body part we're talking about. With a single kettlebell, I can work around those.
Yeah.
Double kettlebell, I still have wiggle room because I've got an independent chassis, and I can still work around a little bit, but it's less than single kettlebell. Your wiggle room almost goes away entirely once you lock yourself into a barbell.
Yeah.
Whether you're doing that via your hands, military press, bench press, etc., or whether you're doing it through your feet with deadlift and squat and things like that. It's why Coach Boyle and some other strength coaches really focus on unilateral work and have kind of gotten away from the barbell a bit because your wiggle room goes away.
Yeah.
So that thing that you might have successfully compensated around for decades, you don't successfully compensate around for decades.
No, you don't.
So
it's like the only especially for my NHL players, because they're tall, hex bar. That's all I got them to do. I'm like, you guys are locked. I don't need you back squatting because you guys' ankles just suck, right? Like you have no ankle mobility. You're wearing casts and you're standing on knives on a slippery surface. How deep do we need to squat here? And it's you still see a lot of the strength coaches that they work with on the team. The protocol is, well, everyone back squats. I'm like, yeah, but not you. You're not built for it. I said, I'd rather you hex bar. I'd rather you Bulgarian split squat. I'd rather you do a lot of other different things for your quads than squat. It doesn't make any sense. And my structure will allow for I just got into back squatting again, and it feels good. Like it's just being smart about it. I'll do it maybe once a week just to do some pause squats and some cluster sets. But for me, it just helped with my vertical again to get the quad strength that I lost back into the system. And but the main one, it's been kettlebells and calisthenics. Talking about how your body, or you know, your body has to move around the bar because the bar is fixed, and the kettlebells can move around your body. Same thing with Olympic rings,
Mm-hmm.
using Olympic rings for pull-ups and presses and whatnot. Yeah, it's more unstable. It's a little bit more complex, but you don't have to worry about a lot of these restrictions like a bench press versus a ring press. And I think people don't value enough of kind of some of these other tools that they have available that are way cheaper and way easier to set up in your home or in a home gym. But I think they just don't know how to use it, or maybe understand what you just said of this allows your body and the tools to move together and how you're structured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think finding those things, and like right now, if you said grab one kettlebell and leave your house, I'd probably grab a 32 kilo. And I've joked before, and it's no joke. I've done some very light kettlebell training. So if you stuck me in a room with a 16 kilo bell, knowing that I'd rather have a 32 or a 36, but you stick me in a room with a 16 kilo bell and say, come out strong, I will.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I know how to use that tool. I was doing predominantly 16 and 20 kilo training and could still press the beast back in 2006, 2007. And so like the way we train, it doesn't just have to be that 1RM, that constant heavy training. And that's one of the things with Plan Strong and Built Strong and some of our programming offerings within Strong First. When you look at the very successful Soviet Olympic lifting program, their average relative intensity for their training was about 70 to 80%.
Right.
Less than 5% of their training went above 92.5%. That's how precise they are.
Yeah.
Less than 5% of their training went above 92.5%. Right. And so you don't need much of that stimulus. And it's the same conversation with things like hill sprints and some of these very powerful tools or glycolytic repeats. You only need 5 or 6 of those.
Yeah.
You don't need 20. Right. So yeah, there's different ways to do it and get great results and feel good.
Yeah. It, I've really appreciated it. And when my rehab friends, PT friends, they ask me, well, like, what's your favorite tool? I'm like, kettlebell, because you can do so many different things. Talking about getting to and from the ground, you didn't have the strength to move your own body weight. When I was in the hospital, I used the Turkish get-up pattern to get to and from the ground, just because I had to stack in a line, find that position of greater efficiency so that my nervous system could propel. And if I missed that position, well, as soon as I tried to push the ground away, I crumbled back down. Using that with total hip replacements, total knee replacements. Oh, we can't bend the hip or knee past 90. Fine. We'll teach you the Turkish get-up pattern. That's totally fine. We'll put a chair here so that you can kind of use that for balance if you need to. But the pattern of the Turkish get-up, it teaches you how to get to and from the ground in the most efficient way possible, because it teaches you. Yeah. So it's one of those tools where, it can be used as performance. It's used as a screen, but it's also a way to get to and from the ground the most efficient and effective way possible.
I'm thinking of a 90, I think she was 93 at the time. She came to see me for a session. A friend of hers had recommended, and her problem was she was getting in her closet to swap out her shoes or clean up her shoes at 93. And she would get dizzy when she stood back up because she would do it just by bending over.
Right.
And I said, well, let's take a look at something here. And I said, okay, show me what you're doing. She almost falls over. I'm like, okay, what's a little different strategy here. Let's get both hands on your knee. Let's come on down, to the half kneeling position. Okay. So now tall kneeling, do what you need to do.
Yep.
Okay. So now put your knee back up, put your hands back on your knee, give a little push off, and come on up. And I had her practice that a couple times on each side. And she's like, that's really good. And she left. Like, I had answered the question that she had. I had helped her with that thing, and she had no other interest in working with me or spending any time with me.
Yeah.
Because I had helped with that. And so, I always come back, and I had a client who went through some cancer treatment and came back, and first thing I did, get down on the ground. I had a big plyo box by him so that he could do the chair thing for balance and help getting up. So All right, down on the ground. He's like, what do you mean? I'm having trouble with that. Okay. And that's exactly where we need to start. So come on down. Let's do some bridges. Let's do some, little bit of stretching, stuff like that. You got to get back up, right? Yeah. Okay. You know how to do a get up. So, just kind of going through again and rebuilding that pattern. So 100%. And FMS had a gentleman on who had a traumatic brain injury, and traditional rehab for things like that, when you're relearning, is they put the gait belt on you and they put you in the parallel bars and they force you to walk. He's like, what are you guys doing? Like, he did his own rehab, back down to the ground, rolling, crawling, et cetera, et cetera.
Reorganize.
And, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's a successful strategy across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when I was in the hospital, and I was finally strong enough they would come and get me for PT. And it was funny enough, I knew all the physios there at the hospital. So they would come and get me, and they'd wheel me in. Brett's just like, what do you want to do? I was like, just put a mat on the floor, let me roll around for 30, 40 minutes. And it was hard. It was painful. It sucked. So I was doing, any transitions I could figure out, holding positions, breath work, dead bugs, bridges, whatever I could do to start reorganizing my structure from top down, center out. And, there were days where it was just laying there in tears because it sucks and everything hurt. And then afterwards they're like, okay, well, then they'd get me up, and then I would practice some squats on the bars, and then we try crutch walking. And every day we'd go a little bit further with the crutches into, when they were trying to get me to sit to stand prior to, I was like, just put me on the floor. It made it easier. Like I could feel things fire up simply because I spent time on the ground to reset and reorganize the structure and the neurological system on how the original programming was. And I think it's super undervalued. People they want to get into the squatting. I'm like, let's get to the floor first. Let's just see how you move down there. It's that step. You're an elite athlete. I get it. Can you roll for me? Oh, you can't. Well, that's probably why your single leg balance sucks on that side. Right. Do you think running's going well for you? You can't stand on one leg for more than 3 seconds with your eyes closed. How well do you think sprinting's going? Probably not that great. And that's probably why your right knee is all jacked up and your right low back is all jacked up, because you have no control on the left, simply because you can't roll to the left. Like, it's so funny. Like, people try to fix stuff in the standing position. I'm like, go back to some fundamentals. And if they're clear, great. Let's move on to something else. But at least you went and checked to make sure that those early patterns are there.
The biggest reason I get everybody on a foam roller has nothing to do with the foam roller.
Yeah.
It is you moving yourself on the ground.
Yeah. Positioning, you got to roll, you got to twist. Yeah. You tricked them.
Exactly. I don't call it, I'm not telling them that we're resetting X, Y, and Z. I'm like, let's do the foam roll.
Yeah.
But as we go through all of that, and they're like struggling to lift themselves up, to roll their calves, or they're struggling with these different positions, that struggle, they're sweating.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because they hit a tender spot with the foam roller. But as they go through this, it is ground-based strength training.
Yeah.
It is that reset of some fundamental things that people can take with them everywhere. And so the soft tissue benefits that I think are there are secondary for most of the people that I work with initially, because I just need them on the ground doing this and relearning how to orient themselves and move in those ways. So it's definitely half kneeling, crawling, all these things and that's all part of that ground-based kind of warm up that I keep in the mix all the time. And it just, allows for that 3D movement from the ground up that really keeps things moving. And then, I know if an ankle's sticky, or my T-spine needs a little extra work, or, my cross crawls are off, I'm like, I should probably go back through and find out what's happening here.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It's just smart and it's logical. When people are applying certain movements or exercise, like, well, how did you get there? Right. What was the progression up to that point? And if you can't tell me, well, I saw this online, or, it's good to do this, I'm like, well, how do you know it's good for them? You look at my office, or you look at, I look disorganized. but in my head, in my practice, is probably the most organized, and my wife would attest to that. My thinking in the human body is so structured and organized based on fundamental principles of how are we designed? Where is energy allocated? What does the nervous system prioritize for survival, right? Like, go after those things first. And oftentimes you'll clean up all these little aches and pains and these injuries of why they occurred in the first place. Definitely. And I think that's what drew me to your content so early on. I'm like, this is making sense of all the things I learned in school. Because in school, they teach you, okay, we're going to learn about the shoulder today. Let's go through range of motion, active, passive. Let's do some special tests. Great. Okay. Now tomorrow we're going to work on the hip. I was like, well, okay. Well, when I get a diagnosis of the what do I treat? Oh, you treat the shoulder. Okay. Well, that doesn't work. I need to find out why that happened in the first place. And there's nothing organized and systematic to guide the students as to, okay, when you have an injury, go through the system. Like, there's got to be an algorithm and a systemized process to get to the why. It's very easy diagnosis wise, right? But, that's why I think early on when I came across your content, I'm like, this is gonna change how I practice. And it has. It's been the foundation ever since, which I'm truly grateful for. But I want to close out. I mean, you've worn many hats: educator, clinician, entrepreneur. How have you stayed passionate or relevant in the space for so long and continue to do so?
I'm going to break that into just a couple layers. One of the things that I've done since 2003 is teaching. Yeah. Right. I'm up at certifications. I've taught literally hundreds of certifications workshops. And so as a presenter and as a teacher, and that's, presenting for 2-3 days and trying to mass information onto people is different than being like a teacher in a school where you have 9 weeks to get a message across potentially. I had fallen into a rhythm, and I still joke that if you stand me up and push the button, an FMS workshop will come out. Right? If you push the right button, the workshop's just going to happen.
It's there.
Same jokes, same. I'm going to make the same jokes and tell the same stories, and the workshop will come out. And then I went through a speaker school with Greg Rose and the FMS gang, and I realized some of the bad habits that I'd fallen into, and it sparked my passion again for presenting and being the best presenter possible. And so it kicked off learning more about how to present and the things that I needed to change from a professional standpoint, as far as, like, say, being Strong First Director of Education and working within Strong First. I've got people like Fabio Zonin, Pavel himself, and so many of our other instructors. It's too many to name. I have to stay on top of my game because somebody else is going to surpass me. Right. I've got some really good folks around me. And so, I need to stay sharp because I need to, think we're back now. Tom, you got me now?
I got you. Yep.
Cool. Yep.
That was weird.
Sorry. Little internet drop on my side. So I think I'm back up and running now.
Okay.
So I was,
you were talking about speaking,
I was talking about, so, beyond the presentation aspect and getting my passion reignited there, within Strong First and the kettlebell world, like, I have people like Pavel and Fabio and these wonderful instructors that I work with that I have to maintain, my edge and my game within that. And I'm just, ever since I laid my hands on it back in 2001, the kettlebell has made so much sense to me and has unlocked so much strength and potential from what I can do that I don't have to do anything to reignite my passion for that. It's kind of hard baked in at this point that it's what I do. And so I've been incredibly blessed. I never could have imagined that taking my first job in Chatham, Virginia, the metropolis of 1,200 people, would result in me getting to know and have a friendship with Gray Cook, and end up teaching with him from 2006 to still doing some teaching and work with FMS. I never could have imagined that going to this kettlebell certification in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in the freezing tundra of 2002, we were outside throwing water balloons at each other at 9:00 at night, for a purpose. It wasn't just fun. But there's me meeting Pavel, and then I end up starting to teach, and it becomes my career. So my mentors, I've been just incredibly fortunate, and these are folks that are continually progressing, and it keeps me continually progressing. And the burden that I feel in teaching, I think when you're teaching certifications and people are then taking this information and they are applying it to other people, to themselves and other people, and they are literally making careers and feeding their families off of the things that you're teaching.
Yeah.
That's a burden that I feel. Yeah. And I need to be putting the best information possible out there, because people are taking this and, like I said, they're applying it to themselves, their students, they're living, using this information. Nobody has to hold my feet to the fire. I've got my own feet in the fire and trying to do my best all the time. So
that's awesome. I feel we're very similar in that. And, as we evolve in our career, we go from, the clinician being a new student, excited to get into the field, help individuals, and then expand on that to, expand your reach on perspective and how you can continue to better the profession, which is, I'm grateful for your continued work and what you keep putting out there. And I hope everyone who listens to this also finds the value, because what you and Gray and Pavel have created and shaped, it's really shaped my perspective and how to get people out of pain and move better. So thank you for all the work you've done. Where can people find you? Where's the best place?
So I recently did my own website update. So you can still go to I know. Looks like a 3-year-old did it, but be kind when you go to the site. appliedstrength.com.
Okay.
You can also get there by going to theironcardio.com.
Cool.
And Instagram at Brett Jones SFG. That's where I do 99% of my social media. And of course, strongfirst.com. I've got 60 plus articles and things on there, and constantly putting some new information up within the Strong First social media and stuff like that, and within the FMS social media. Just had a couple training tips go within the FMS social media as well.
Great. That's awesome. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I have more questions, but maybe we can save it for part 2 in the future, maybe when Iron Cardio 2 comes out, and we'll go through that. But thanks for coming on, Brett. I appreciate the work you've been doing and appreciate you. So we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it and look forward to part 2.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Staying Relevant. If you enjoyed it, check out the AMT certification at amtcertified.ca, where we help clinicians and coaches get better results faster. Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes and share this with a coach, clinician, or athlete who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep staying relevant.